is all about questioning power and injustice because growing up, I had so little of it. I was born in North Kolkata. Although we didn't come from much money, I was always exposed to great books. So I had a deep understanding of visual arts as a creative tool. I grew up in an extremely abusive, patriarchal and misogynistic family. Violence was happening behind closed doors. Patriarchy and misogyny becomes so deeply ingrained that it continues to rebrand itself as fair, kind, but I guess a pesky little feminist like me identifies it for its ancient old bullshit that it really is. After my periods began, I suddenly moved from being a sweet little girl to this young woman. And I was kind of seen as someone who needs to be protected, who needs to be told what to do. My father told me I'm a slut dancing around in shows. With that came beatings and emotional abuse. At times I wanted to take sleeping pills and kill myself. When I was 17 years old, I lost my father. And as horrible as it might sound to say this, but it really was my chance to sort of get the hell out of where I was. Everything I've ever gone through in my life has been directly propelled into the work I make. To Conquer Her Land tells the story of India's first cohort of border armed force women who were placed at the very notorious India-Pakistan border. It was like, wow, women take themselves to such difficult situations and places to see where they can live a life of freedom. They're emancipated because they get a salary for being there and they're working rather than being married off. They just do it to do something powerful to get some sort of validation. Not only their desire for adventure, but also queerness, youth, caste, and this sort of undefined idea of patriotism. They were at least making other friends and addressing their own gender and sexual orientation. It was not before I did this that I really saw Indian women shown in that light. But at the same time, they're in an extremely intimidating space. Women are so easily uprooted and erased that they rarely find their place in history. Here they are. They have protected the land, they have been here, and they are here to stay. Blood Speaks addresses blood politics and a woman's coming of age, her sexuality, and her protest. Period marks a big change in a woman's life when she's transitioning from being a little girl to becoming a woman. People start fearing you because your sexuality comes into being. You're becoming a powerful creature, and that is seen as something to be shunned and sinful and dirty. Chapari is a practice of seclusion and menstrual exile, where women are dislocated from the rest of the family, where they are on restricted diet, when they're cut off from family contact. Society wasn't giving them the full place in their life as long as they bleed. I formed coalitions with WaterAid, and together we launched a campaign called To Be a Girl. We raised £2 million to provide reusable sanitary kits and build some form of sanitary conditions for girls affected by menstrual taboos. We made a lot of noise, and eventually, by the end of 2018, they did pass a new law criminalizing Chapari and replacing it with a fine and a jail sentence for all those people who continue to push their women into confinement. There has been success in some ways, but it's a large, long path before hearts and minds of people change. Truth is stranger than fiction in Centralia. Vast swaths of land and forests have been cleared out and displaced because of mining. It has created a civil war situation in central India where the forest dwellers have become guerrillas and they've picked up arms to fight the government. 60% of those guerrillas are indigenous women. There is a deep spiritual connection between indigenous women and the land that they have guarded. Places where women are leaders of nature is where nature thrives. We had something in common. All our bodies had gone through an enormous amount of annihilation, pain, fear, violence, sexual assault, and some even rape. Truth is the first casualty in war. Especially when we are covering complex situations where there is no one story, where there is no one voice, but it's various voices who are all trying to tell you their version of the story. Centralia is a docu-fiction where I'm not the moral arbiter of the whole story, but my voice is interlaced with voices of ground-level activists, citizen journalists, indigenous storytellers, as well as the guerrillas themselves. In Centralia, there is no resolution in the end. You start from the fire and you go back into the cosmos, which means that as a reader, you escape what you're looking at, but the people who are in the work are trapped. My mother and I were both victims of domestic violence and assault and every other thing that comes with it. So while I managed to escape thanks to her sacrifice, she continues to live in a threatening space. Fireflies was my way of reckoning with my own story of shame, violence, and acceptance. We hold a lot of magic and can make meaningful contribution to the world. Fireflies celebrates these two dualities of women, of vulnerability and also our magic. In India, myths coexist with reality. Magical realism became a visual tactic to address real stories of violence. It's really important that you tell your own story. That's where lies your real authenticity. My mother and I were willing to share our trauma and stand in solidarity with all the women who have walked that same path and came forward and told me their stories. That is the full circle to complete authentication of me as an artist. Brown bodies are shrouded with shame. Growing up in a South Asian household meant you never discuss sexuality. And I wanted to do it with no fear, no worries about what bodies of middle-aged women look like. What are the desires of an elderly woman? Our wants and desires need a place. I felt very powerful when I did that, and I forgot about how many layers of fat are in my body or how many wrinkles are there or how our skin is shriveled up, and like, how many stretch marks we have, everything became a sign of protest and a symbol of sort of strength and resilience. The older I started getting, I was becoming a version of my mother. I now feel like I am my mother. We are one. We're coming from the same body, same dust, same color. I feel like my father was a good man, but he was just heavily indoctrinated. I don't think Fireflies would have happened if my father was alive. When you're an artist and you're talking about injustice, your practice becomes personal and political, and you will push the medium just the way you're pushing your body, your mind, your soul. All the works are in dialogue with each other. They all address ideas of intersectional feminism and environmental justice. Sisters of the Moon puts me and my body in this dystopian fictional landscape, which is on the front line of climate change, telling the story of a woman's relationship to the land, her elemental rights to water, and her education. A woman's life is made possible through her rights to education. A Bangladeshi girl told me that her house completely went underwater. Obviously, when you don't have a house, you don't have a toilet. If a girl does not have a toilet, as soon as a period starts, she's going to drop out of that school. A girl didn't have a sanitary napkin. She started bleeding and she started leaking onto her chair. She was so deeply ashamed. Then after that, she stopped coming to school. That story was formulated in the picture, except that the woman in the photo is a bleeding superhero. We wanted to break the visual ideas of how we should represent poverty and victims. Photography is a true alignment of your mind, your eyes, and your soul. When all three come together, the real picture and the magic happens. And I've often used it as a form of antidepressant. That is important for artists because we are so vulnerable, but also something that has huge power in sort of galvanizing meaningful change in the world and, affecting hearts and minds. Sisters of the Moon was launched with Water is Thirst for Knowledge campaign, and together we ended up raising £5.5 million. I'm just someone who navigates the world around addressing injustice and tries to disrupt power wherever I can. We learn a lot in the darkness. When everything goes to sleep and quiet, the real action begins. To get to that light, you have to go through the darkness.